Hello there. As you can see, I'm experimenting with my sound quality, so please do let me know in the comments if it is sounding better for you. Welcome to my review of the Rockford Files Season 1, Episode 15, Sleight of Hand, directed by William Wyatt and written by Stephen Cannell and Joe Swirling Jr., based on the novel Thin Air by Howard Brown. The episode begins with a seemingly tortured Jim walking along the beach, suffering from flashbacks of a drowned girl, before he makes his way to Rocky's beach house. Rocky tries to cheer Jim up, but there's something clearly seriously wrong as Jim starts to recount the reasons for his troubles, and we transition into flashback. This is a very different style of opening to what we've seen so far, and is a masterful way of signifying that this is not going to be a typical Rockford episode. For, despite all the variety in the show up until now, it's generally followed Jim investigating a client's case. But as we see from the flashback, this is all about Jim. We see him on a sailing boat with a woman he's dating, along with her young daughter, before transitioning to them in Jim's car. The child is asleep on the back, and as day turns to night, the woman, Karen, joins her daughter Julie in the back to sleep until they get home. They get back to Karen's house, and she goes in while Jim gets Julie. But after putting Julie to bed, he's unable to locate Karen. She seems to have just vanished, her handbag being the only trace of her. It's remarkable just how quickly this episode is able to not just set up what is going on, but also telegraph exactly what the stakes are. We've seen Jim have casual romances before, but this immediately feels more serious, as he's clearly taken to stepfatherhood very well, and seems really invested. Compared to the date he went on with Sarah Butler, where he took her for a picnic, going on sailing vacation with Karen is clearly a step up for him, and how comfortable he is in her home all adds to the atmosphere of a contented man. It's also helped, of course, by James Garner's warm performance.
Oh, I'm getting tired. I might end up going to sleep on you.
Always the back seat.
After searching for a while, Jim calls Dennis and is in no mood to banter with him.
What do you say, Jimbo? What is it this time?
Knock it off, Dennis.
Which alerts Dennis to the fact that something serious has happened. When he arrives, we find out Jim and Karen have been dating for 6 months, and while Jim is just as smart-mouthed with Dennis as usual, it has a different tone, a much more serious edge to his sharp tongue.
Did you check the whole house?
What do you think, Dennis? Oh, no, we had a great time.
Doing what?
Stealing soup from the Salvation Army. Why do you think I got rubber pockets in my coat?
As Uniform is checking the area, they discover a body of a man who's been murdered nearby. Back at the station, Lieutenant Deal is ready to arrest Rockford, as Julie has apparently told them that her mother didn't come home with them. Jim puts this down to the kid only being 3, but Deal reveals the murdered man was Karen's neighbour who was out for a walk and was killed around the same time Karen disappeared. Jim is not happy about this, and Deal doesn't have enough to make a case, so Jim goes back to Karen's, having told Deal he isn't planning on investigating on his own. But we should know Jim well enough by now that we know that this was a lie. Jim wanders around replaying the events of the night, coming to rest at a bus stop, which gives him an idea. He checks with the bus driver who drove that route, but the driver isn't sure. He does remember he picked up a woman without a handbag and dropped her at a cab depot, which leads Jim to a hotel with a very unhelpful desk clerk.
I've gone without sleep for 24 hours. I've lost both my girl and my patience, and I'm looking for someone to take it out on.
Eventually, the desk clerk gives up the name and room number of a Diana Lewis, but the woman who answers is indeed Diana Lewis. She claims not to know anything, and that the reason she took that bus was because she was having an affair with a married man in Karen's neighbourhood. As Jim's leaving, he is confronted by Diana's boyfriend, but is in no mood to explain himself and leaves. We then transition back to the beach house where Jim is explaining that's as far as he's got with his search. Rocky points out a problem in Jim's story, that Julie said her mother never came home with them, and maybe, just maybe, she didn't. This makes Jim realise that he never actually saw or spoke to Karen after their last stop on their way home. So it could have been someone else in the back. Diana Lewis. He goes back to her hotel room only to find she has been murdered, and after a brief search he discovers a matchbook from the inn where he last saw Karen. He calls Dennis to let him know what he's found, and Dennis tells him there's a warrant out for him. Just then he hears the door and hides as Diana's boyfriend returns. After some gentle persuasion, the man, Michael Cordine, says he's a barman at the inn. Apparently Karen took a wrong turn in the inn and saw something she wasn't supposed to, so they grabbed her, sending Diana out in her coat, in her place. He claims not to know why, as he doesn't know what other business the inn is involved in. But Jim follows Cordine to the inn, and we hear on the radio that a mob boss, Vincent Minetti, is on the run, thought to have fled to Mexico. But based on the fact that this is the second time now we've heard his name mentioned, I wouldn't be so sure.
Just got another call on Vince Minetti.
They sound like all the others?
No, some guy saw him going into Mexico.
State, federal, and local authorities are still frustrated in their search for reputed underworld boss Vincent Minetti.
Jim isn't either and calls in a fire and robbery at the inn to get the cops and the fire department there. This smokes out the mobsters, and Deal and Becca arrive just in time to pursue them. After a brief chase, they corner the mobsters, but it's far too late for Karen, who they killed long before Jim caught up with them. In the epilogue, Rocky tries to shake Jim out of his grief, but Jim needs more time.
But what are you gonna do?
I don't know. Just want to sort things out.
This is an incredibly brave and daring episode that challenges the audience with something different, and yet it all works so well. The tone is much more serious than we've previously seen, with Jim's personal stake in it, but also he's a much more serious figure, not easily able to move back to his carefree personality after what's happened. Even so, the character of Rockford doesn't feel like he's changed. He still feels like the same character, but one facing real problems, which is not always easy to do when you're adapting a novel about completely different characters. The story itself is clever and keeps you guessing, and almost fits perfectly into the world of the show. Almost, but not quite, as it feels as if the reason they kill Karen off is so they can go back to normal by the next episode. For as good a job they do of establishing Jim and Karen's relationship at the beginning, getting rid of her at the end feels a little cheap just to return to the status quo. Even so, it doesn't diminish the quality of the episode, which really gives Garner and Beery the chance to shine and further cements their relationship as a father and son. Easily a 5 out of 5 for me. Thank you. Goodbye.